folks. I hope you've had a beautiful evening at the spa evening organised by the team at Aberdeen Cyrenians. I've been invited this evening. My name is Mike Burns. I'm the CEO of Aberdeen Cyrenians, and I've been invited to do the bedtime story. I've chosen a story that has a lot of meaning for me as a person, but also one I think that the work of Aberdeen Cyrenians and the work we're all trying to do to help the most vulnerable. It's a story about Ricky and it's by Raja Kipling, and it's from the Jungle Book. I've done a bridged version of the story because it's a long story, so I hope you like it before you fall asleep. This is the story of the Great War that Rikki Tikki Tavi fought single-handed through the bathrooms and the big bungalow in Segoli. Darzi the tailor bird helped him, and Chukrindra the muskrat, who never comes out into the middle of the floor but always creeps round by the wall, gave him advice, but Rikki Tikki did the real fighting. He was a mongoose, rather like a little cat in his fur and his tail, but quite like a weasel in his head and his habits. In his eyes and the end of his restless nose, they were all pink. He could scratch himself anywhere he pleased, with a leg, front or back, that he chose to use. One day in high summer flood, Rikki Tikki Tavi was washed down out of his burrow where he lived with his father and his mother, and it carried him kicking and clucking down a roadside ditch. He found a little wisp of grass floating there and clung to it till he lost his senses. When he revived, he was lying in the hot sun in the middle of a garden path, very bedraggled indeed, and a small boy was saying, "Here's a mongoose, a dead mongoose, let's have a funeral." "No," said his mother, "let's take him in and dry him. Perhaps he really isn't dead." They took him into the house, and the big man picked him up in his finger and thumb and said, "He's not dead, but he's half choked." So they wrapped him in cotton wool and warmed him over a little fire, and he opened his eyes and sneezed. "Now," said the big man, "don't frighten him, and we'll see what he'll do." It's the hardest thing in the world to frighten a mongoose, because he is eaten up from the nose to the tail with curiosity. The motto of the mongoose family is "Run and find out," and Rikki Tikki was a true mongoose. He looked at the cotton wool, decided that it was good not to eat it, and ran all around the table, sat up and put his fur in order, scratched himself and jumped on the small boy's shoulder. "Good gracious," said Teddy's mother, "and that's a wild creature. I suppose he's so tame because we've been kind to him." "All mongooses are like that," said her husband. "If Teddy doesn't pick him up by the tail or try to put him in a cage, he'll run in and out of the house all day long. Let's give him something to eat." They gave him a little piece of raw meat. Rikki Tikki liked it immensely, and when it was finished, he went out onto the veranda and sat in the sunshine and fluffed up his fur to make it dry the roots. He felt better. He said to himself, "There are more things to find out about this house than all my family could find out about in all their lives. I shall certainly stay and find out," thought Rikki. He spent all day roaming over the house. He nearly drowned himself in bathtubs, put his nose into the inkwell on the writing table, and burned it on the end of the big man's cigar. For he climbed up the big man's lap to see how writing was done. At nightfall, he ran into Teddy's nursery to watch how kerosene lamps were lit. And when Teddy went to bed, Rikki Tikki climbed up too. In the morning, Rikki Tikki came to breakfast in the veranda, riding on Teddy's shoulder, and they gave him a banana and some boiled eggs. Then Rikki went out into the garden to see what has to be seen. "This is a splendid hunting ground," he said, and his tail grew bottle-brushy at the thought of it, and he scuttled up and down the garden, sniffing here and there till he heard very sorrowful voices in the thorn bush. It was Darzee, a tailor bird, and his wife. They had made a beautiful nest by pulling two big leaves together and stitching them up at the edges with fibres, and had filled the hollow with cotton and downy fluff. The nest swayed to and fro as they sat on the rim and cried. "What is the matter?" asked Ricky. "We are very miserable," said Darzee. "One of our babies fell out of the nest yesterday and Nag ate him." "Ate him?" said Ricky. "That is very sad. But I'm a stranger here. Who is Nag?" Darzee and his wife only cowered down in the nest without answering. Far from the thick grass at the foot of the bush there came a low hiss, a horrid sound that made Rikki Tikki jump back. Inch by inch out of the grass rose up the head and spread hood of Nag, the big black cobra. "I am Nag. Look and be afraid," said Nag. Rikki Tikki was afraid for a minute, but it is impossible for a mongoose to stay frightened for any length of time. "Well," said Rikki Tikki, and his tail began to fluff up again, "do you think it's right that you should eat the babies out of this nest?" Nag was thinking to himself. He knew that mongooses in the garden meant death sooner or later for her and her family, but wanted to get Rikki Tikki off his guard. So he dropped his head a little and put it on one side. "Let's talk," he said. "You eat eggs. Why should I not eat birds?" Behind you, look out," shouted Darzee. Rikki Tikki knew better than to waste time in staring. He jumped up into the air as high as he could, and just under him whizzed the head of Nagina, Nag's wicked wife. She had crept up behind him. Rikki Tikki felt his eyes growing red and hot. When a mongoose's eyes grow red and hot, that means they're angry. And he sat back on his tail and hind legs like a little kangaroo and looked up all around him and chattered with rage. Now Rikki Tikki knew he was a young mongoose, and it made him all the more pleased to think that he had managed to escape a blow from behind. It gave him confidence in himself, and when Teddy came running down the path, Rikki Tikki was ready to be petted. But just as Teddy was stopping, something wriggled in the dust, and a little tiny voice said, "Be careful, I'm Death." It was Kariat, the dusty brown snakeling that lies in the dusty earth, and his bite is as dangerous as a cobra's. But he is so small that nobody thinks of him, and so he does more harm to people. Rikki Tikki's eyes grew red again, and he danced up to Kariak with the penciling and peculiar rocking of a mongoose, a swaying motion that he had inherited from his family. It looks very funny, but it is so perfectly balanced at the gait that you can fly off from in any angle you please, and is very useful when dealing with snakes. This is an advantage, thought Rikki. Kariat struck out. Rikki jumped sideways and tried to run in, but the wicked little Kariat lashed within a fraction of his shoulder. Teddy shouted to the house, "Help, help, a snake." Rikki Tikki heard the scream from Teddy's mother and his father, who ran out with a stick. But by the time they came, Rikki Tikki had sprung, jumped on the snake's back, dropped his head far between his forelegs, bitten it as high as he could up his head, got a hold of the snake and rolled away. The bite paralysed Kariat, and Rikki Tikki was just going to eat him up when he remembered that a full meal makes a slow mongoose, and if he wanted to keep all his strength and quickness about him, he must keep himself thin. Teddy's mother picked him up from the dust and hugged him, crying he had saved Teddy from death, and Teddy's father said that it was Providence, and Teddy looked on with scared big eyes. That night at dinner, walking to and fro among the wine glasses on the table, Ricky must have stuffed himself 3 times over with nice things, but he remembered Nag and Nagea and thought it was a very pleasant to be patted and petted. His eyes would get red from time to time as he thought that the snakes were still in the garden, and he would go off looking for them in his long, long war cry of Rikki Tikki, Tikki Tikki, Taka. At bedtime, Teddy carried him off to bed and insisted on Rikki Tikki sleeping under his chin. But as soon as Teddy was asleep, Rikki Tikki went off for his nightly walk around the house, and in the dark, he ran up against Chahundra, the muskrat, creeping around by the wall. Chahundra is a broken-hearted little beast. He whimpers and cheeps all the night, trying to make up his mind to run into the middle of the room, but he never gets there. Chahundra sat down and cried. Still the tears rolled off his whiskers. I'm a very poor man, he sobbed. I never had spirit enough to run into the middle of the room. Hiss! Can you hear that, Rikki Tikki? Rikki Tikki listened. The house was still, but he thought he could just catch the faintest scratch, scratch. A noise as faint as that of a wasp walking on a window pane. The dry scratch of a snake's scales on the brickwork. It's Nag or Nagina, he said to himself, and he is crawling into the bathroom sluice. Rikki Tikki stole off to check Teddy's bathroom, but there was nothing there, and then to Teddy's mother's bathroom. At the bottom of the smooth plaster on the wall, there was a brick pulled out to make a sluice for the bathroom water, and as Ricky stole in, he heard Nag and Nagina whispering together outside in the moonlight. When the house is emptied of people, said Nagina to her husband, the mongoose will have to go away, and the garden will be ours again. Go in quietly, and remember that the big man is the first one to bite. Then come out and tell me, and we will go and hunt Rikki Tikki together. But are you sure there is anything to be gained by killing the people, said Nag. Everything. When there were no people in the bungalow, did we have any mongooses in the garden? He asked. So long as the bungalow is empty, we are king and queen of the garden. And remember that as soon as our eggs in the melon patch have hatched, as they will tomorrow, our children will need more room. I had not thought of that, said Nag. I will kill the big man and his wife, and the child if I can, and come quietly away. Then the bungalow will be empty, and Rikki Tikki will go. Rikki Tikki tingled all over with rage and hatred as he heard the words of the snakes. Angry as he was, Rikki Tikki was very frightened when he saw the size of Nag's head as it came through the sluice. And Rikki could see Nag's eyes glittering, full of venom. If I don't break his back at the first jump, thought Rikki, he can still fight. And if he fights, oh, Rikki thought. He looked at the thickness of the neck below the hood of the snake, but that was too much for him. And a bite near the tail would only make Nag more angry and savage. It must be the head, he thought to himself, the head above the hood, and I must not let go. Rikki jumped. As his teeth met, Rikki braced his hold back to the back of the neck and the head, and this gave him just 1 second's purchase as he made the most of it. He was battered to and fro as a rat would be shaken by a dog, to and fro to the floor, up and down and around in great circles, but his eyes were red, and he held on. He closed his jaws tighter and tighter. For the honour of his family, he preferred to be found with his teeth locked. He was dizzy, aching, and felt shaken to pieces, but when something went off like a thunderclap just behind him, a hot wind knocked him senseless, and a red fire singed his fur. The big man had been wakened by the noise, and had fired both barrels of the shotgun at Nag. Into the mongoose. Again, Alice, the little chap, has saved our lives now. It's the mongoose that saved our lives, she said. Rikki Tikki spent the rest of the night shaking himself tenderly to find out whether he really was broken into 40 pieces, as he fancied. When morning came, he was very stiff, but very well pleased with his doings. Thou have Nagina to settle with, and she will be worse than 5 nags, and there's no knowing when the eggs will hatch. Goodness, I must go and see Darzee, he said. Without waiting for breakfast, Rikki Tikki ran to the thorn bush, where Darzee was singing a song of triumph at the top of his voice. The news of Nag's death was all over the garden, for the sweeper had thrown the body onto the rubbish heap. Oh, you stupid tuft of feathers, said Rikki Tikki angrily. This is no time to sing. Nag is dead, sang Darzee. The valiant Rikki Tikki caught him by the head and held fast. The big man brought the bang stick, and Nag fell into 2 pieces as he was dumped onto the rubbish heap. He will never eat babies again, said Darzee. All of that's true, said Rikki. But where's Nagina? Said Rikki Tikki, looking carefully round him. You're safe enough if you're in the nest up there, but it's war for me down here. Stop singing a minute. Where is Nagina? On the rubbish heap by the stables, said Darzee. Have you heard where she keeps her eggs? In the melon bed, on the end nearest the wall, where the sun strikes nearly all day. She hid them there 3 weeks ago. And you never thought to tell me, said Rikki. Rikki Tikki, you're not going to eat the eggs. No, not eat the eggs exactly. No, Darzee. Now, Darzee's wife was a sensible bird, and she could understand that the cobra's eggs meant that young cobras later on would be danger for the birds. So she flew off from the nest and fluttered in front of Nagina by the rubbish heap and cried out, "Oh, my wing is broken. The boy in the house threw a stone at me and broke it." Then she fluttered more desperately than ever. Nagina lifted up her head and hissed, "You warned Rikki Tikki when I would have killed him. My husband lies on the rubbish heap this morning, and before the night the boy in the house will be very still. It's no use running away. I'm sure to catch you, little fool of a bird. Look at me." Darzee's wife knew better than to do that, for a bird who looks at a snake's eyes gets so frightened she cannot move. Cleverly, Darzee's wife fluttered on, piping sorrowfully, and Nagina quickened her pace. Rikki Tikki heard him going up the path, and he raced from the melon patch, where in warm little litter above the melons, very cunningly hidden, he found 25 eggs. It was not a day too soon. He could see, he said, the baby cobras curled up inside the skin, and he knew that the minute they were hatched, they could kill man or mongoose. He bit off the tops of the eggs as fast as he could, taking care to crush the young cobras, and turned every litter from time to time to see whether he had missed any. At last, there were only 3 eggs left, and Rikki Tikki began to chuckle to himself when he heard Darzee's wife screaming, "Rikki Tikki, I led Nagina towards the house, and she has gone onto the veranda, and oh, come quickly, she means to kill." Rikki Tikki smashed 2 eggs and tumbled backwards down the melon patch with the 3rd egg in his mouth, and scuttled to the veranda as he heard he could put a foot on the ground as fast as he could. Teddy and his mother and father were there. They sat stone still, and their faces were white. Nagina was coiled up on the matting by Teddy's chair, within easy striking distance of the little boy's bare leg, and she was swaying to and fro, singing a song of triumph. "Son of the big man that killed Nag," she hissed, "stay still. If you move, I will strike, and if you don't, I will still strike." Teddy's eyes were fixed on his father. All his father could do was whisper, "Sit still, Teddy. You mustn't move. Teddy, keep still." Then Rikki Tikki came up and cried, "Turn around, Nagina. Turn and fight." "All in good time," said the snake. She moved her eyes and settled her account first with the boy, and then you presently. "Look at your friends, Rikki Tikki. They are still and white. They are afraid. They dare not move. And if you come a step nearer, I'll strike." Look at your eggs, said Rikki Tikki, in the melon bed near the wall. Go and look, Nagina. The big snake turned half around and saw the egg on the veranda. Ah, give it to me, she cried. Rikki Tikki put his paws, one on each side of the egg, and the eyes of the mongoose were blood red. What price for a snake's egg? For a young cobra? For a young king cobra? For the very last of your brood? The ants are eating all the others down on the melon bed as we speak. Tricked, tricked, Nagina thought. Rikki Tikki chuckled. Nagina had spun around, forgetting everything for the sake of the one egg. Rikki Tikki saw Teddy's father shout out, and a big hand catch Teddy by the shoulder and drag him across the little table safely out of the reach of Nagina. Now it was time for Rikki Tikki to strike. Then he began to jump up and down. He threw me to and fro, but he could not shake me off. He was dead, and the big man blew him away. That's what happened to Nagina. Nagina saw the egg that lay between Ricky's paws, and full of rage, she gathered herself together and flung out at him. Rikki Tikki jumped up and backwards. Again and again she struck, and each time her head came with a whack on the matting of the veranda, and she gathered himself together like a watch spring. Rikki Tikki danced in a circle to get behind her, and Nagina spun round to keep her head to his head. Rikki Tikki had forgotten the egg. It still lay on the veranda, and Nagina came nearer and nearer to it, till at last, while Rikki Tikki was drawing breath, she caught it in her mouth, turned to the veranda steps, and flew like an arrow down the path, with Rikki Tikki hot in pursuit behind her. When the cobra runs for her life, she goes like the wind flicked across a horse's neck. Rikki Tikki knew that he must catch her, or all the trouble would begin again. He ran and ran as fast as he could after Nagina. Rikki Tikki saw Darzee, wise wife, fly off the nest and flap her wings above Nagina's head. If Darzeen had helped, they might have turned her, but Nagina only lowered her hood and went on. Still, the instant delay had brought Rikki Tikki time to catch up with her, and as she plunged into the rat hole where she and Nag used to live, his little white teeth were clenched on her tail, and he went down with her into the hole, a place where very few mongooses, however wise and old they may be, would care to follow a cobra into its hole. It was dark in the hole, and Rikki Tikki never knew when it might open out and give Nagina room to turn and strike at him. He held on savagely and struck out his feet to act as brakes on the slope to try and slow the snake down in the hot and moist earth. Then the grass in his mouth and the hole stopped him and slowed him down. And Darzeen was shouting, "It is all over, Rikki Tikki. We must sing about his death. It's all over for Rikki Tikki," she said. "Valiant Rikki Tikki is dead, for Nagina has killed him underground." So he sang a very mournful song that he made up on the spur of the minute, and just as he got to the most touching part, the grass quivered, and again, and Rikki Tikki, covered with dirt, dragged himself out of the hole, leg by leg, licking his whiskers, and Darzee stopped with a little shout. Rikki Tikki shook some of the dust out of his fur and sneezed. It's all over, he said. "The widow will never come out again." Rikki Tikki curled himself up in the grass and slept where he was. He slept and he slept till it was late in the afternoon, for he had done a very, very hard day's work. Now, he said when he awoke, "I will go back to tell the coppersmith and his family, and I will tell him that the garden is safe and that Gina is dead." The coppersmith is a bird who makes a noise exactly like the beating of a little hammer on a copper pot. And the reason he is always making it is because he is the town crier for every little Indian garden and tells all the news to everybody who cares to listen. When Ricky got to the house, Teddy and Teddy's mother still looked white and still looked full of fear, as she had been fainting throughout the day. And Teddy's father came out and cried, "It's him, it's Ricky Ticky Ticky." And that's the night he ate all that he could. He was given more than any mongoose could ever eat, and he went to bed that night on Teddy's shoulder with his full tummy. Teddy's mother looked on Teddy late into the night and said to her husband, "He saved our lives. He saved Teddy's life. Just think, he saved all our lives." Ricky Ticky woke up with a jump, for the mongoose were light sleepers. "Oh, it's you," he said. "What are you bothering for? All the cobras are dead. As they weren't, I'm still here to make sure that you're safe." Ricky Ticky had right to be proud, but he did not grow too proud, and he kept that garden as a mongoose should. With tooth and jump and spring and bite, never will a cobra dare show its head in sight. The end.